Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt Dancona.
And this is the first Two Matts podcast of 2025.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
There's so much going on already. It's not even funny.
It's insane, isn't it?
It's insane. I mean, you come back from Christmas and talk about hit the ground running. It's incredible.
Well, normally the news agenda can be sluggish at this time of year.
It really is.
But it's been weirdly, bizarrely berserk this year.
The ticket price is called dynamic.
Yeah.
So we should start, I guess, with Elon Musk, Keir Starmer and so on.
We were going to do sort of projections of 2025.
Yeah, and we can talk about some of that.
We'll do that in the second half. But
there's some clear and present stuff.
This Starmer, Farage, Musk row is one of the most bizarre sort of 5-day stories I can remember.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, what has happened is that to scroll back a bit, one of the things that we all got used to in Trump's first term was waking up to mad tweets from Trump. But actually, even although Trump hasn't been inaugurated yet for his second term, we're now moving into the terrain where Elon Musk's tweets on X, which he owns, are the kind of focal point, really, of every kind of plot point in what's happening. Yeah. And so a lot has happened. We said in the last podcast of the year, we talked about Farage and his reform treasurer, Nick Candy, going to Mar-a-Lago to meet Elon Musk and the prospect of $100 million going Farage's way. Yeah. But on Sunday, Farage appeared on Laura Kuenssberg's morning show, and he was ever so slightly, quite politely reticent about Musk's support of Tommy Robinson, one of our clowns of the year, by the way, not to forget, last year. And this and who knows what else. I mean, Musk is so capricious and crazy that who knows. But it led to Musk saying Farage is not up to being the leader of the Reform Party.
We should be candid. It was greeted with great hilarity on our WhatsApp chat.
Well, I think you would have to have a heart of stone not to laugh at that one.
Because Farage had spent all morning preening on Laura Kuenssberg.
So, you know what? He's cool.
Yeah, no, right? This was the thing. And I was thinking, when he said that, I thought, God, what a weird reveal from him, because it instantly made him look desperately uncool, of course.
Yes, I mean, it made him look like a fogey, holding on to an iPad and saying, look at the things I've got on this.
I wondered whether... Obviously, Musk will have seen the clips from that in short order and would have cringed like mad at, the presumption of Farage saying, he is going to fill our coffers. It won't be 100 million, but that's for the birds, he said. But he may back us because he thinks that we're the future. And then saying, I'll tell you what he makes us look cool. And Musk, in his sort of preening self-regard, will have felt, I think, my reading of it is, Musk probably has always thought Farage is a bit of a tit, right?
Yes.
He's sat across the table and he sees this. I mean, the last thing Farage is a tech bro.
No, he really is.
This barber-clad guy ranting on about migration and beer and, all these sort of weird
fox hunting
obsessions that he's got. And also... I imagine overplaying his relationship with Trump as well,
very much so.
To Musk, who has got, who's bought Trump,
he's purchased him,
who
for Christmas.
owns Trump for Christmas,
he
right?
He owns him,
and Musk will have sat there, and this will have triggered him to think, do you know what? Go fuck yourself.
So, in the darker fringes of MAGA, which, as you know, I sort of occasionally police for looking for madness, there is a hint that they've got something on Farage which changed Musk's mind. I don't believe this.
What in terms of
some
hidden
story, right?
Are we now getting into the realms of promoting conspiracy theories?
Well, that's why I was going to quickly U-turn
just
and
drop
say I wanted to drop it in because it's again funny. Yeah. But also to say I don't believe it for a minute. I think you're right. I think that Musk has had. I mean, first of all, Musk, is at least ketamine addled. He's admitted to that, so legally we can say that, right? And madly capricious and incredibly fickle. Yeah. So I buy your line that he sort of thought, I don't like this old fogey. I just don't. I think that's much more sense than that there's some killer fact. I don't.
But
buy
he
that.
will have been the sort of the trigger. There's no question. Will have been Farage's reticence around Tommy Robinson.
Yes, because it's a fact, and you remember last year, Liz Truss got in trouble because she was on stage with Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
Trump's former chief strategist, and Bannon referred to Tommy Robinson as a hero.
Yeah.
And Liz Truss didn't react. She just stared into space, which is, of course, quite normal for her.
Yeah.
But, back here, there was a lot of people saying, well, do you not think she might have, as a former prime minister, have said something at least to distance herself? In that world, insanely, Tommy Robinson is seen as a English hero.
Yeah, which is obviously that is such a minority position in the UK at large. Most, the vast majority of British
absolutely.
people think Tommy Robinson is what he is, which is just a toe rag scumbag.
Yeah.
Who's in jail, by the way, as Keir Starmer pointed out today,
Yes.
who's in jail precisely not because he's an avenging hero, but because he nearly jeopardised the trial of
Paradoxically, he nearly led to a lot of people getting away.
So Tommy Robinson's just a fuckwit. Right?
Yes, I mean, you have to recall that, MAGA is crazy. And this is a party that's about to embark on first of all, to release the January the 6th, quote unquote, hostages and embark on a program of mass deportation. So they do see people like Tommy Robinson as heroes. But as you say, in the UK, it's not like that. And that's why Farage has always, publicly at least, distanced himself from Tommy Robinson.
But in some regards, and these are words that you won't find me saying more than once a decade.
Yeah.
Farage has shown more integrity in that regard than the leader of the Tory party has, I think.
Well, I mean,
in relation to this,
he's right in that what he understands, and this is why they're doing so much vetting this time with their candidates, is that the whole project that Farage has been undertaking for more than a decade now, really, depends on going thus far but no further. Mm-hmm. And to what you said earlier, Tommy Robinson is too far.
Yeah.
And so he left UKIP because Jarrah Bannon, who was then the leader of the UKIP, wanted to make Tommy Robinson an advisor on grooming and gang rape and so on. Yeah. And Farage said, I think correctly, no, that's wrong. But it's interesting, isn't it? As you were saying, the Tories have been very, very cagey about
Well,
all
let
this.
me spell out why I think Badenoch has behaved disgracefully over this,
and reasons.
Jenrick, but in particular,
Jenrick,
but they are bizarrely linked in a way.
Well, he's still in her shadow cabinet.
Exactly, and she's endorsed what he said. When Jenrick jumped in and said this is a disgrace, and he basically repeated Elon Musk's mad accusations. Farage at least went out and said Tommy Robinson is not for reform, and there's some distance between us and Tommy Robinson. Badenoch's never referred to Tommy Robinson, but what she has done is endorse what Jenrick said which has endorsed what Elon Musk said, which is a pure endorsement of what Tommy Robinson is saying. Yeah. So you can draw a straight line.
You can draw a line
through
That's
Tommy Robinson, through Elon Musk, out of the mouth of Kemi Badenoch. And that's what Keir Starmer, I think, did brilliantly today.
Really well.
When he said, okay, let's condemn Musk, and especially the absolutely disgusting and ignorance is the word that you can apply to everything Musk has said. But the ignorant, disgusting attack on Jess Phillips, let's condemn all of that.
Vile.
But the important thing is the slippery slope we're on now, when leaders of political parties in the UK who have not just should know better, but have a duty to do better, are latching onto this bullshit and trying to seek political gain from it.
I thought Starmer today, he was actually giving a speech on the NHS at Epsom in Surrey. But I think the thing that, sadly for the NHS, the thing people will take away was he gave what for me was his best performance since the race riots in August. It was robust. The correct level of indignation. He framed it very well, which was facts versus social media lies,
Yeah.
which we need more of, please. And he made the point, which can't be made often enough, that he himself, and this is true, as Director of Public Prosecution, had a very good record on this. He was one of the first people to see that there had been serious problems in the handling of the rape gangs, that cultural sensitivity had played too big a part, it needed to be sorted out, and he put in place guidelines. Furthermore, there was an inquiry led by Professor Alexis Jay, which reported in 2022, and Jay herself has expressed huge frustration that the Tories didn't implement it.
Yeah.
So if there's a villain of the piece, it isn't Keir Starmer. Now, he has to get on with implementing those recommendations. That's true. But the last thing that's needed here is a long public inquiry. Yeah. We really don't need that. We know what went wrong. We know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I thought it was he expressed all that very crisply.
Yeah.
With just the right amount of indignation, and he looked today like a prime minister.
And he also made the point, which is such an obvious point that maybe people forget it needs saying, but he made it very clear. And the reason I'm going to make the point now is to say that these two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
To say that what happened to those girls and is still happening, I am sure, in some measure, is absolutely abhorrent. The reasons behind it must be explored, and if there are cultural reasons that have been imported into our society and have led to this, they must be expunged.
Yeah.
Right. All of that's absolutely clear and a no-brainer. And the ones who've really suffered are the girls, the victims. Yeah. But to say it's not mutually exclusive, to hold that thought, but also to say that for someone like Elon Musk to 10 years later, actually 20 years after the first of these incidents, to suddenly stumble upon it and like some new age prophet say, these people should be in prison. There's a cover-up. There's been multiple inquiries. Starmer's record, as he said himself, is open and transparent. It's a public office, chief prosecutor. So there's no cover-up. But for this dope-addled, half trillionaire to sit there and just get his phone out and punch out these mad tweets. But what's so frightening is how quickly half of British politics has complied with Musk's desire.
I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, the first thing is that you're spot on about the survivors, because on the Today programme this morning, Monday, Lucy Duckworth of the Survivors Trust was very clear. She said, look, Musk doesn't understand what he's talking about. And I thought that was very powerful. But also, the thing you just said is kind of the key, isn't it? Because how are we going to handle this? Because Musk has 210 million followers on X, the social media platform he owns. He is very close to Trump. He's about to become head of this bizarre Department of Government Efficiency along with Vivek Ramaswamy. He's a powerful man in the American setting. But I think that's a clue to the way we should handle it, which is, in America, Musk has a particular role, which is he has become incredibly important to federal government. They are too dependent upon him.
Yeah.
And now Trump is giving him power over how federal government spends money. Way too powerful.
Yeah.
So in America, he is a person of huge influence and power. But that's not true here. As far as Brits are concerned, he's an enormously wealthy private citizen, lives in America, owns X, it's a cesspit, and uses it as a bully pulpit to advance lies and falsehoods. And it's really important that that's how we treat it.
Yeah.
So I saw our friend Tom Baldwin on the BBC earlier, and he was, I think, rightly criticising the BBC for leading off with Musk. Finish the sentence, in the stories. And I think that we have to dampen that down.
And we've seen it in the Telegraph, haven't we? It's
very
to a
much
bizarre degree. And by the way, there's a bit of sort of inside baseball element to this, which is that the Telegraph has
clearly
been up for sale for
a long time,
years now, in the most complicated process you can imagine. And the latest guy who was meant to have been the shoe-in buyer, that's not worked out. They're desperate for a buyer. And of course, Musk could be that buyer.
He could buy it with his lunch money.
Pity the poor editor, by the way, who have to field his bloody calls.
Pity, and also pity the relatively few remaining staff, because we all know that one of the first things he does wherever he goes, if he buys a company, is drop half the staff immediately.
By the way, it is also worth mentioning about this myth about Musk being the great inventor.
Yes.
He's never invented anything. He buys into companies, he ditches the founders, and then there's a pattern where he buys in, elbows out the founders, and then starts getting state grants and funding into his businesses, which give him incredible power and leverage and capital to do the same in other businesses. So he's not an inventor. He's an incredible capitalist.
For a self-styled libertarian, he's enormously dependent upon A, state intellectual property, and B, state subsidy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great irony. But I think we need to... obviously, he's an important public figure. It'd be idle to deny that. And as we followed Trump's presidency, he's going to be important. But I don't think... You see, I think Musk thinks there are basically two serious countries in the world. One is America and the other is China. He has huge commercial interests in both, and they're the countries he treats with seriousness.
With deference,
Yeah, I mean, he's a big... I mean, he is very popular in China. There are sort of fan clubs and this bizarre cult of Elon in China. But I think for him... the UK, Germany, places like that are just video games.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to respond in kind, which is actually, no, mate, we're not a video game. We're a country which is facing all sorts of difficulties. And if you could shut the fuck up, that would be great. And if you don't expect us to respond to every tweet. And I hope that Starmer has put down he said a line has been crossed, but I hope he's also put a line in the sand, which is, don't expect us to respond to every single Elon Musk tweet, because that would be completely crazy.
I think he's done. He did a great job. Like you said earlier, I think his tone there was that sort of measured disgust was how I thought it to characterize it. But I think the important thing he did was, one, he spent more time on his answers talking about cutting waiting lists in the NHS, because if Starmer's going to be victorious in this battle for the political future of this country, he's got to deliver. He's got to be able to stand there and say in 4 years' time, I've cut 1 million off the waiting list. I've fixed the potholes. I've sorted the schools out. I've done all of the, I've increased I've grown the economy. He's got to be able to say that.
I mean, if he'd been half as passionate about the NHS as he was about Musk, we'd be in a good place.
We would be in a good place. So he said that, but what the most important thing he did on the Musk topic was to put it onto Badenoch.
Yeah, I mean, he the most powerful point he made a lot of powerful points, but one that really cut through, I thought, was when did it become the case that politicians, when Jess Phillips was so horribly vilified by Musk in a tweet, why did politicians of other parties not rally to her cause? And it made me think he's right. Yeah. There was a time when all political parties would have said that's too far.
And I think you can trace that time. So I think even Boris Johnson, had he been in opposition, if Boris Johnson had been the leader of the opposition, I think Boris Johnson would have had the decency to say that is you've crossed a line.
Yes.
So I think after that, Liz Truss onwards, you've seen a moral decline in the Tory party that is now all about how can we compete with reform to get to the bottom quicker.
I mean, one of the things that I think we'll be coming back to a lot in the next 4 years is this intimidation, is this political violence problem? Because, when Musk, with his level of followers, says that about Jess Phillips, that creates an instant security problem.
100%.
And by the way, as we've often said in the podcast, this has been going on for quite some time. But I heard recently that Anthony Fauci, the American health expert who is very important in COVID and is now, possibly facing prosecution by Trump, who knows, he has a detail of 6 security staff.
Yeah.
And each of these sort of dashed off tweets by people like Musk have real world implications.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to be powerfully aware of that. And I would like to see, although I don't expect it from the current Tory party, some cross-party resistance to it.
Well, one thing that occurred to me, I think you're completely right, by the way, and I hate to say this, but I am almost sure that there will be an incident at some point in the near future that we'll be able to trace back to this Ferrari. I'm sure something horrible will happen to somebody. God forbid, but who would be surprised?
Well, look, I mean, just in terms of basic probabilities and the history of what has happened.
The climate, if you look at the climate
it's
is
so on a
right
knife edge.
for it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
One thing I did think, and this probably will never happen, but if I was Jess Phillips, I'd consider suing him for defamation. I'll tell you why. Not to recoup some kind of financial gain off the hurt he's caused, because you would give any result to a charity for sexual abuse victims. But to prove that the rule of law still trumps wild gobshites with their own social media platforms.
I mean, she could do defamation. She could also do malicious communication.
Yeah.
Because if that's not malicious communication, I don't know what is.
I think it's very important that if what we're saying is we're entering a new phase of society where there's a disconnect between facts and argument.
Yes.
Right, where facts are almost an option in the argument.
Yeah.
Right. That anyone can say anything about anybody and we'll just label it free speech. Well, okay, maybe in the States that's more true, but over here, I think one of the great things about this country is you can't just say anything about anybody.
As you know, I'm a mad keen defender of free speech, but I'm also a mad keen defender of the rule of law.
Yeah.
Free speech is not an absolute right.
Yeah.
And when you do things like this, you should be. I mean, this is why I was so supportive of Starmer in the August race riots, because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's just tweets." No, these were incitements to violence. Sorry, that breaks the law.
That's right. I mean, there's a guy today who's been jailed for 7.5 years, and this has been thrown in by some of the morons who've been shouting at us as well. We're neither here nor there, but we've been writing pieces about Elon Musk needs to shut up, and of course, when you post that on X,
but
you get you fucking libtard twat, this, that, and the other, some obscene comments.
It's another day at the office.
It really is. But there's a guy been jailed for 7.5 years today for what some might say, well, he's entitled to say what he wants. What he was saying was, right, lads, well done last night. Tonight we're going to go and brick the mosque in Liverpool at 8:30. That's not free speech.
That's not protected speech.
That's not free speech. That's incitement to violence.
Incitements to imminent violence.
That's right.
I mean, it's the clearest case of speech that's not allowed.
That's right.
So,
Well, I'm sure this will rumble on, and we'll come back to it in future. Let's take a very quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about the 4-year anniversary of something that happened today.
Yeah, it did.
What can an object tell us about the conflicts that have shaped our world? Conflict of Interest is the podcast that invites celebrity guests to Imperial War Museum London for a carefully curated tour of our most revealing artefacts. Join Cerys Matthews, Phil Wang, Eddie Izzard, Jamali Maddox, Kerry Mulligan and more as they get to grips with the history of Afghanistan, the Malayan Emergency or the Vietnam War. That's Conflict of Interest from Imperial War Museums. Series 3 out now.
So, Matt, January the 6th.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's not just any old date, is it?
It's not. It used to be.
Yeah.
But it isn't now. And 4 years ago, it seems longer, strangely, actually, but 4 years ago, I don't know what you were doing when you clicked on the TV or the screen or whatever and saw that there was an insurrection going on at the Capitol. But I'll never forget it.
Wild.
It was amazing.
Let's just take a moment and just relive that scene a bit, because it was wild, wasn't it?
It was quite extraordinary. The US Capitol, the temple of American democracy, the Republic, being invaded by a violent mob who, thank God, were unable to achieve their real objectives, which was to hang Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi and others.
Yeah.
This was to stop the certification of the 2020 presidential election, which, as we all know, Trump had claimed had been stolen. And this was the sort of the kind of explosion that followed his kind of fermenting of anger and resentment over it, and not least in a speech that day at the Ellipse in Washington. So we all turned on, and there were images from the Senate, and it was which is normally, to be honest, quite a sleepy place because it's not like Parliament. There's no yaboo, and there was the QAnon shaman jumping around, and people with tattoos and Nazis. I remember there was a guy with a T-shirt with Camp Auschwitz on it. I mean, it was really amazing scenes, and there were so many elements to it. I mean, first of all, the cost of it in terms of just human suffering was enormous. I mean, at least 5 people died that day, or in the 36 hours after. 174 police officers injured, and I think that everyone at that point thought, this is too. We were talking about lines in the sand before the break. This is too far. Yeah. And Trump is obviously finished. Yeah. And then something very odd happened, which was that everyone came back in, and the certification of the election went ahead. Now, it can't be emphasized enough. This is a completely routine ritual in American democratic, the calendar of the election. But after the riot, underlined 3 times, 147 Republican lawmakers voted not to certify the election. And at that moment was born Donald Trump's second presidential campaign. Yeah. Because as the world looked on and thought, well, he's finished, whatever else happens now, that's that.
Yeah, because the conversation for years afterwards, 2 years after, 3 years after, was how long would he serve in jail for insurrection?
100%. And I think if there was there were many areas during the last presidential term, the Biden term, but one of them was Merrick Garland as Attorney General not to just get on with putting Trump behind bars, because actually they concentrated on the sort of the mob, and there have been about 1,000 convictions. Who, not all necessarily, but many now are in line for a pardon. Mm-hmm. Because what happened was that it showed how elastic history is. It's only 4 years, but at the time, as we say, it looked as if everything was over for him. But since then, he has turned January the 6th into his moment, almost a moment of triumph, which is insane. But it's the conspiracy theories and his victimhood and the martyrdom of the so-called January the 6th hostages, and and the crucial point was, by the time of the presidential election last year, we were all saying democracy is at stake, and America agreed on that. But the trouble was, there were 2 different versions of democracy. Yeah. There was the democratic Kamala Harris version of it, which we would, I think, sign up to, which is the traditional notion of democracy. And then there was the Republican version, which was, they stole it last time, they can't steal it again. They've been trying to ruin Trump in the courts. We must stop it. And there was one of the newsletters I follow in America, a guy called John Gantz, who's one of my favorite writers. And he had this line this morning, and it was, the line on January the 6th is that even if it was a coup or insurrection attempt, it was a farce and a failure. But this is wrong. In retrospect, it was a great political success for Trump, not only because he got away with it, but because of how he could fracture and polarize the response. Attention paid to it is now considered sour grapes, part of a discredited political strategy and a remnant of liberal sentimentalism that is fast going out of style. He came back from it and rallied even those who initially condemned it or were frightened by it to his side. And he made the defense of the constitutional order a partisan issue. Now, Gantz, just to be clear, is not pro-Trump at all. He's just analysing it. And I think that is a beautifully expressed way of understanding why we are where we are.
That's right. And it also gives you that sense of why, just to hark back to our previous conversation about Musk and Tommy Robinson, about why that kind of violence that is now seen as heroic in the States.
Absolutely.
When they look at Tommy Robinson and they see
the same.
It's the same.
Yes.
It's this kind of what we see as far right thuggery. Yeah. They see as heroic action.
No, absolutely. And I think that there's a difference. Trump represents order, strongman order. The liberal side of the track represents law and order, and they're not the same.
Yeah.
And this is what we're seeing here. Now, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because many times in the election year, we talked about what would happen if Trump lost. And this day, we talked about whether, because it was true, there were militias being rebuilt, even though a lot of them were in jail, all over America, who were undoubtedly, and the FBI shows this, were planning to descend on Washington today to stop Kamala Harris in her capacity as the president of the Senate ratifying the election.
Yeah.
Now, that didn't happen. I mean, actually, if you look at the pictures coming out of Washington, they have made serious security precautions, and rightly so, because, you know, you don't want to tempt fate. But it is odd, isn't it, to see the peaceable transfer of power that Harris is doing being punished by Trump winning.
Yeah.
I mean, how odd is that?
No, I mean, the irony is complete, really.
It is.
If you were scripting this for Hollywood, this is how you would script it.
Yes, and I mean, it is undoubtedly an incredible comeback, but etched into that comeback is a terrible story about how, at least Americans, but I fear not just Americans, treat what we used to think of as indisputable facts and evidence.
Yeah.
You know, that it's odd, isn't it, that in an age when there's more footage and camera phone records and tweets and WhatsApp stuff about everything, you'd have thought that it would become easier to nail down the truth. But the opposite has been the case, that there was this alternative narrative, which good old Tucker Carlson was very early with, which was that he described them as they weren't insurrectionists, they were sightseers. Very partial editing of some of the footage. And this has taken hold, which was they were, you know, Trump called it the Day of Love, which is straight out of 1984, isn't it?
Incredible. Love is anger, truth is
absolutely.
lies.
And I think that you know, Orwellian is a word that has been debased by overuse, but unfortunately it's quite useful.
Well, he saw that
he saw
coming.
all this happening,
and what Orwell saw was the media's role in that and the control of the media. And what he got wrong, I feel, is that what he foresaw was an overbearing governmental control of the media, which, as it's proven, is totally unnecessary, because the media will do it for the government. It's, you know, without beckoning.
and also, and this is where it gets really uncomfortable and sweaty, is that, you know, Aldous Huxley was also right in Brave New World in saying that we would, if not welcome this, we would allow it.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the heart of the problem, which is our immune systems to bad information are very badly depleted. That a generation of social media, which is what it is now, we've all of us emerged with less sort of resilience against lies.
Which is one of the reasons why, by the way, because there's an internal debate going on in TNE Towers about whether we should carry on being on X. And my view remains that we should be there, because
I think so.
Otherwise, you know, the if you just allow that to become the swell of it's now, according to Musk anyway, you know, it's now the biggest news source on the planet.
Yeah.
There's more people getting their news from X than they are from anywhere else.
Yeah.
So think about that. You know, it's, if we're not there, even if we're just the voice that people are kicking around saying, you horrible commie libtards, you know, and all of this stuff, wokerati tossers, then at least there's a challenge that at least they know there is another side, that it's not a consensus. So I think we do have to be there. But what is frightening to me, and where Elon Musk is also at the forefront, and I know this is a topic you wanted to talk about, is the development of AI.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you said to me quite rightly that, you know, we worry too much about the Daily Telegraph and the BBC and all of this business and Twitter. But actually what's coming down the tracks in terms of how information will be received and checked is utterly terrifying if the guy controlling it is utterly terrifying.
Yeah, because, I mean, I suppose one constructive way of framing it would be the government and conventional media got completely caught on the hop by social media. We didn't see it coming, or rather we didn't see its effects coming. And we were steamrolled over, really. This time, we've been through it once bitten, twice shy. We should know now that these big technological leaps have a massive effect upon the information supply. And there are two things that have struck me both anecdotally and in reading, is that one is that the verb Google, which we all got used to using for search, is being replaced slowly by chat. So instead of saying I'll Google that, people say I'll chat that, which means they'll go to ChatGPT or a similar service to find out what it is.
Yeah.
And that's culturally interesting. And the second thing was that I noticed, and I didn't really sort of absorb this until quite recently, that at the very top of the Google search page is AI overviews.
Yeah, all the time.
Right? Which provides you with a very sort of helpful summary of some of the key issues that are engaged in your search. And then you think, well, hang on, so there's that, and then there's the paid service on Google called Gemini, and there's Elon's Grok, and there's Microsoft Copilot, and then there's OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude, and they're all multiplying, and I'm sure there'll be consolidation around one or two. But the point about them is, who the hell writes the code and the algorithms in the black box and oversees what is chillingly called trust and safety? I mean, I want to know how what's appearing in ChatGPT and at the top of the Google search page and in much more sophisticated tools, which will get doubly sophisticated by the end of this calendar year. How's that decided? Who did the program?
Yeah.
Because I understand that the point of AI is that the machines then go off and do their own work, but they've got to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
And who holds the pen in this?
100%. And if
they control the information to the world.
100%. And if people think that, just look at the way Google operates right now, right? People think it's some anodyne, neutral search engine. It's totally far from that.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it presents paid for links, sponsored links. So when you're searching for stuff, quite often today, you can search for a government service, right? In the UK, passport renewal.
Yeah.
Right. You'll get 5 or 6 third-party commercial enterprises trying to kid you into using their service before you use the government's service, right? So it distorts quite willingly what you're actually trying to achieve. If you search for we had a problem with people searching for subscribe to the New European would be served an advert from the I newspaper.
Right.
Because the I paper's marketing department were buying search terms for the New European to try and drag our customers into their customer base, right? So it's distorted commercially, but it's also distorted by the algorithm. And whatever anybody tells you, the algorithm is weighted, right? No one knows how or to what degree, but the algorithm is weighted to something, and it's not neutral. Neutrality is a myth.
What's so clever about these chatbots is that they use the language of the calm oracle.
Right, right.
They appear to be stable and steady, right?
Yeah.
But actually, there are two things going on, both of which are sinister. One is, what's the person programming the chatbot in its initial coding trying to get you to do? Where ideologically, commercially, whatever. What are that person's objectives? And the second, which is no less dangerous, is that particularly Gemini, the Google one, it goes through your Gmails and your searches to find out what you think.
Yeah.
So it serves you up what you want.
Yes.
So the implication of the exercise is, I want to find out about whatever it is. But that's not what it's doing. It's providing you with a biased view from the originator of the AI and a biased view from your own, what they call in America, priors, your prior beliefs. So your chances of getting, the closest that one can get, it's always an approximation to unbiased information, is minimal. But the way it looks, and the way it looks particularly to kids and students, is that, you ask these things to write you an essay, and
Yeah.
they will,
Yeah.
and they really will. And the ones, by the way, that are coming through for $20 a month or whatever it is, they'll write you a management consultant report on your team.
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, so this is a huge step forward I think robotics will be important this year as well. But I think that in terms of our concerns about the way in which the world is, there's a big global battle between two fundamentally different ways of approaching behavior and politics and all that. This technology is going to be at the center of it all. And I do worry that, clearly Trump doesn't care, so he'll let them do what they want. That's the lesson.
That's what Musk has bought.
That's what the lesson of them all hanging around Mar-a-Lago is. These tech.
Musk said, if Trump loses, I'm fucked.
And
he didn't mean personally.
No,
he meant commercially.
He meant commercially, and Trump won, and he's unfucked.
Yeah, exactly.
But in this country and in the EU, and again, it's another reason why it's very vexing that we're not in the EU. We know we need to be collaborating in a very aggressive and radical and fast way to find out, okay, how do we regulate this? Do we have, for example, the expertise? Because it's not obvious to me that in government there'll be people readily available who will be able to do that. And what we need to do is hire them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. It is terrifying. By the way, folks, if you want to support something that will never be produced by the hand of AI, then subscribe to the New European. Get your free bottle of El Rayo tequila, worth 34 quid, I think, when you subscribe.
What a bargain.
Who could ask for more in dry January? The link is in the show notes. Also, I'll give a shout out to something that started off as life as being mocked as being absolutely riddled with lies and misinformation, but has become actually one of the soundest sources of facts in the world, which is Wikipedia.
Yes.
And Wikipedia, if you look at it, because it's moderated by people who really do care.
Very
about
rigorously,
the truth,
actually.
Absolutely rigorously. It's gone from being a place where you could prank friends by making up false entries.
Can't do that anymore.
No. Within a second, the stuff is fact-checked, moderated, and I know that they live on a hand-to-mouth basis.
Yes, they do.
So support the New European, but also support Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia is an unexpected but good example of how web collaboration can work.
I think
it's not all bad.
Jimmy Wales is one of the great unsung heroes of our time.
I quite
and
agree.
The reason I say he's unsung is that he could have made billions from Wikipedia, but I know for a fact he hasn't made anything like it. And they live on a hand-to-mouth basis, and they deserve your support. So go to Wikipedia. We're going to take a very short break, and we're going to come back.
Just before we do,
go on, please.
And because it sort of links together technology and Trump, which we were talking about before, is people are already talking about the next presidential election. And, rightly so, because unless he does something terribly unconstitutional, Trump really will leave office in January 2029, aged 82. And one name that is starting to drift into conversations at the fringes is that of Jeff Bezos.
Oh, my God.
Because Bezos has watched Musk, who can't run for president and is clinically insane, right?
Yeah.
Bezos is a very odd man, but he's not clinically insane.
Yeah.
He's moved to Washington. He's bought a newspaper. He's stopped it from backing Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a pattern here?
I do.
I mean, he's got that space rocket stuff too, which is embarrassing. But if I was to, there are all the obvious people like J.D. Vance and Don Jr. and all the obvious people.
Yeah, but why not?
But if you work on the basis that outsiders start with an advantage, and Musk can't run, and who actually has more sort of intrusion in people's daily lives than Musk, who owns X, it's the bloody owner of Amazon.
Correct. Do you know I was the first journalist in Europe to interview Bezos?
I didn't know that.
He came to London and he was doing and it was when he used to dress like we do, he dressed in cheap clothes, cheap suit.
Yeah.
We were staying at I can't remember the name. What's the Lansdale, is it? What's the hotel on
the Lanesborough?
The Lanesborough, thank you. Which
fancy,
was a super expensive hotel.
Yes, fancy hotel.
But he looked out of place there, and he was just an ordinary guy. But I remember asking him, and it was when Amazon was still just books,
Yeah,
right? If you
amazing.
can remember that.
Yeah.
And I
Seemed
remember,
amazing enough.
I think you can still find that it was a Q&A interview. Rather good, though, I say so myself. And I said to him, I said, Jeff, where, so you've changed the book industry.
Yeah.
What's next? Where does it end? And he said, well, next year we're going into music. Then we're going to be into clothes. Then we're going to be into furniture. Then gardening equipment. Then wedding dresses. And he went on and on and on. And then he said, it's never going to end. And he did this mad laugh.
Yeah.
This mad laugh. And I think there is a guy who has zero ceiling to his ambition.
None at all.
Nothing would seem impossible.
And
to
I
him.
think that, that leads me on to, just briefly, I think, and talking about things coming up in 2025, it's very clear to me that sport is now migrating globally onto streamers.
Yeah, totally right.
Right?
Totally right.
Which is a big problem.
Yeah.
As if they didn't have enough problems already for all the other channels.
Yeah.
Because you can just see them. It's a specialist one, but Netflix has just brought up the whole back catalogue of WWE.
Has it really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazon has a lot of football already, and in America, even more of these franchises are being sucked up by the streaming monster. So I just think, in the way that we kind of apprehend the world culturally, that's coming down the track.
Yeah, I used to be very pally with Barry Hearn, who.
Oh yeah.
And I once sat in. I used to go round to his house fishing on occasion, and he does business from a bit of a shed around this big carp lake he's got in his house in Essex. And I listened to him doing business on this deck chair. Cooks bacon sandwich right on this gas burner, hands me a bacon sandwich, and then the phone goes, and it's somebody from Sky Sports, and Barry's saying, all right, well, so tell me, what slots have you got then? They say, well, we've got vacancy. We haven't got anything for Wednesdays at 2 a.m. for 3 hours. Right, 2 a.m. Right, where's good? Right, Brazil. I'll put a snooker tournament on in Brazil. Right, okay, yes, sound. That'll be great. And 2 months later, there'd be 16 snooker players in Brazil in a tent playing snooker.
Amazing.
And it'd be broadcast. And of course, it was huge for the scheduling of the television, but also massive for bookmaking and gambling. Yeah. And you've seen since those days the absolute rise of online gambling. When you watch the Premier League football now, you see adverts in Chinese that, it's Chinese bookmakers being watched in China.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Sport has become the new global obsession.
It's amazing. Did you see that Conor McGregor recently disgraced and very much on the turn UFC champion?
Yes.
Is being paid $250 million to fight, I think, boxing, one of those Paul brothers in India.
Is it Jake Paul, isn't it?
Jake
is he the
Paul,
boxer?
I think, there's two, Logan and Jake.
Is Jake the one that fought Tyson?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, hang on. It might be the other way around. But anyway, A.N. Paul, right? Antor Deck, as Bill Nye would say, right? Anyway, he is Conor McGregor, who is not any longer remotely a champion, is going to get $250 million as part of this big Indian tourist thing, which is just a measure of the sort of disfigurement of the market in sport. I mean, it's great that there's money in sport, and I'm basically in favour of it, but that's insane.
Yeah. Well,
insane.
and you see how Barry has developed darts.
Yeah.
Which has suddenly become the obsession of the nation.
It has. I mean, actually, here I feel a measure of sympathy for people who've been following darts for 30 years.
Yeah.
And suddenly there are lots of privately educated wankers going, come on, Luke, it's really good.
Well, look, people paying
Yes.
£1,000 a ticket for the Ali Pali, not even for the finals day, but for corporate hospitality
It's
in
incredible.
Ali Pali.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
I mean, but good on them. I mean, it's nice to see darts getting its
There
due.
you go. In this segment, we've gone from the storming of the Capitol to the storming of Ali Pali.
The storming of Ali Pali.
We'll see you in a minute, folks, for the last part of this show. So welcome back. You may have noticed, dear listener, that this podcast is a little bit longer than the ones we normally do. And the plan is that our Monday evening podcasts will be a little bit longer from now on.
More expansive.
We'll have guests in and we'll try and drill down in a little bit more detail into the things that matter to us all. But one of those topics is obviously the year 2025.
It is, yeah.
There's a lot going on, not just in America and
There
here.
really is.
Europe, it's a massive year in Europe, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, for those of us who care passionately about, not to put too fine a point on it, getting the UK back into the EU, and people who care about the future of liberalism and progressivism, there are some big tests ahoy. I mean, in this country, there are local elections in May, which will have some importance, I think, not perhaps as much as some people think. But the big ones are Germany, Bundestag elections in February, and almost certainly the end of the Olaf Scholz era, and Friedrich Merz of the CDU-CSU alliance, the likely victor.
Yeah.
And then
The almost certain victor.
The almost certain.
Polling twice as much.
What we'll be watching is how well the AfD does.
Yeah. Now, to just bring Musk back into this, because he is all pervasive. Musk wrote an article
Welt am Sonntag.
For Welt am Sonntag, praising the AfD, saying they're the only glimmer of hope for Germany's future.
At the invitation, by the way, of Matthias Döpfner, whom you had the prescience to bollock at Bob Dylan.
Who is
well
like
done.
the Rupert Murdoch of Europe.
A lot worse.
Probably the Rupert Murdoch of the world now, isn't he? He's the new...
Yeah, but I mean, when you start commissioning pieces from Elon Musk, you move beyond Rupert.
What was slightly heartening was the reaction in Germany was instant and quite damning, because the AfD are openly reviled amongst German political parties.
Yes.
In a way that the Tory parties haven't found the Tory party here hasn't found the stomach to openly revile reform. They've cozied up and they've tried to sucker up to. Well, that's not happening in Germany. The AfD are out on a limb.
Yeah, crucially, the CDU, which is the centre-right party, will not form an alliance with the AfD. Now, whether that will be true in 10 years' time, who knows? But at the moment, that's an ironclad rule.
So Scholz is out, we reckon. Merz will, and the centre-right, some sort of coalition will prevail. Merz is pro-EU.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very pro-EU.
I mean, the whole idea of Germany leaving is pretty fringe still.
Yeah.
I mean, German nationhood is so complex for obvious historical reasons, and its relationship with the EU is very deep in the German soul. And so I'd be amazed if in the foreseeable future we see a sort of German move to leave. But it is there in the AfD DNA, right?
But Merz. What's interesting and probably the opposite of what's happened here is that Merz is promising tax cuts.
Yes.
And he's promising to blow open the borrowing capabilities of the German economy, because it's in the toilet and has been for 2 years.
That's massive. And I think what you'll also see, having said what I said about the AfD, I think you will see a much tougher line than we've seen from the CDU hitherto on migration.
Yes, yeah.
Because there is and it's a shame, because I think whatever is said about her, I think Merkel was one of the last great statesmen and stateswomen, of Europe. She really was an amazing figure, but she carries very little water in Germany now politically, and the view, almost not quite universally, but is that the decision to let so many Syrian refugees in 2015 was a great mistake, which is again, I think, a slightly uncontoured view of a very statesman-like decision. Anyway, so where that's interesting for us is that clearly, as we've said again and again, the smash the gangs narrative that Starmer has adopted is nothing nowhere.
Has any gang been smashed yet? There was one, wasn't there? Someone was prosecuted in Germany, but
yeah, I mean, there will be, and then everyone will be very surprised to discover that there continue to be a flow of dinghies going over.
Well, it's risen, hasn't it?
It's risen. I mean, it is a secondary response to a primary issue,
right?
Which requires the kind of bold and at the moment counterintuitive action.
Yeah.
That having said all the nice things we've said about Starmer earlier, I think on this he is just wrong. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're at, and I think that one of the things that will happen with Europe, understood as a continent rather than an institutional body in the next year and beyond, is this crisis over migration is going to continue, and it's going to become, it will continue, unfortunately, to be the issue, and it will continue to bolster parties
Populism.
of the right.
Yeah,
and I, the interesting thing is, it will be interesting to see how a sort of traditional centre-right party like the CDU, CSU alliance copes with this, because clearly when the Tories are off the reservation at the moment, they're just saying nasty performative things, principally generic, but it will be interesting to see how the Germans do it. France is parliamentary elections likely second half of 2025, and then you have to ask, can Macron make it all the way to 2027?
Yeah, well, he's come out over the new year, hasn't he, and said, I'm going nowhere. I'm serving every minute of my mandate, and that's how it is.
Yes. I mean, the question, I suppose, is how long, with the direction of travel that has been obvious in French politics now for 20 years, how long can the Le Pen family be kept out of office? And one hopes forever. But, one has to also be realistic that Macron has not left, will not leave France in a great place. And it took all the ingenuity and sort of, jerry-rigged coalitions which are falling apart to keep them out of the legislature. So, how long that can keep going, I don't know. But the Fifth Republic is in a serious existential crisis at the moment. It really is.
So if Le Pen took power in
that's
elections,
a big if. I mean, we're not there yet.
It is still. But if she did, I mean, she is fiercely against the European Union.
Yes, I think that is more. I mean, I think France's future in the EU is more contestable.
But without that axis between France and Germany on its own, I mean, then the EU doesn't make any sense.
I mean, one has to be a bit careful, because I think that, again, you're right, but the French, I mean, contradictory ideas can exist in voters' heads. And one is, I like Le Pen because she's against immigrants, right? But also I rather like the advantages of being in the EU. I perhaps I'm naive here. I find it hard to envisage the kind of mania that happened in 2016 here happening in France.
I think I remember speaking to people in Germany, obviously about Germany, but saying, and asking them, is anybody arguing seriously for an exit from the EU? And he said, no, it's not even on the table. It's not. We are Europeans.
Yes.
That's it's like saying, you suddenly become an ex-Scouser. You can't. You are a Scouser.
And Brexit followed, 30 years of Eurosceptic journalism,
exactly,
which this isn't the case. So I think that's probably unlikely. But what I do think is a clear and present danger is that the march to the right continues across the continent, and you end up with an EU that it continues to exist, but its constituent parts are very unpleasant. Maloney, Orban, these figures are. They're proving reasonably robust.
Let me ask you a tough question, which is that, if these arguments are prevailing, whether we like it or not, right? If the arguments of the right are prevailing in countries and in portions of our nation, then we can't carry on just saying you're wrong. Or we can't carry on being as binary as they are, I guess. And say, well, the EU is good, migration is good. I mean, we believe these things, but we need to work harder, don't we, to try and
a lot harder
present the evidence.
I think I mentioned to you earlier that one of the things that I think we need to sort of get back in touch with is class.
Yes.
Because I think that one of the things that one of the big, massive dashboard flashing red warnings of the US presidential election was that the Republican Party now has a multiracial working class base.
Yeah.
And Johnson in 2019 actually managed something quite similar, but which he then blew up in the way that he does. But the right is astonishingly now proving better assembling that sort of multiracial working class base than the left. The thing that worries me most about the parties of the left is actually rather specific. It sounds weird, but I think it's the parties of the left are now becoming essentially offshoots of the universities.
Right.
And I think that's I think that's a disastrous
Do you mean
route.
in terms of the recruitment?
Well, I think
into
that essentially, I don't mean everyone who votes Labour is a graduate, right? I don't mean everyone who is involved in Labour policy formation thinks through the prism of university culture, but it's a massive element. And if you look at, in this country, right, last year, amongst graduates, 43% voted Labour and 19% for the Tories. Yeah. Whereas among those with no formal qualifications, Tories led by 39%, 28% for Labour.
Yes.
Right now, the problem with universities is that they should be great places to go and learn about a particular subject, but they're unbelievably terrible places to develop a worldview for governing a country, right? We're not talking about the Oxford and Cambridge that ran the empire 150 years ago. I mean, this is the 21st century now, and the group thing that people keep talking about it's actually the Russell group thing. Right. It is people who, without having to say anything, share a worldview about everything. Yeah. From the food they eat, to the exercise they take, to the way they enjoy sport, to their hopes for their children, to their attitude to property, to their view of people who do less well than themselves in life, to their attitude to places outside the southeast. It's all that.
Yeah.
And I think that for parties of the progressive left, or whatever you want to call it, to be essentially campus parties is beyond disastrous. And I say that as someone who's been involved in universities all my life, right?
It's a fascinating point to make. And I think this divergence from this divergence from the ability of what you would traditionally call working class kids to get into not just politics but media as well. I didn't go to university. I went to a local newspaper as a cub reporter and got trained and worked my way up. So I spent the 4 years I would have been or 3 years I would have been at university sitting with people on piss-stained settees and drinking out of crack mugs and talking about real life. That was a fantastic training.
It's a very good education.
For me, a great education. And now the truth is you cannot get into journalism, the traditional journalism, unless you've got a very good, not only a very good degree, but a very good master's or a postgrad
which is crazy.
Qualification.
There's a kind of arms race now,
it's
which
incredible.
Is silly.
And so when you do encounter people who have somehow fallen through that crack and didn't just get the media degree from the City of London or from Cardiff or wherever, it's incredibly refreshing, but they're so few and far between, whereas they used to be the norm, Matt.
I mean, look, when I started in 91, the Times newsroom was it wasn't very mixed in terms of gender and race, but in terms of class, it was totally mixed, right? And that was a second education, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd come out of university and with a worldview, I'm sure I had, you're never conscious of your worldview. But that Times newsroom was actually, in a funny way, where I think I got my real education, because, I was being shouted at by guys on the news desk who had unbelievable mileage of experience under their belts. And they weren't impressed. It's just, it needed to be done. Now, all I'm saying, I suppose, is that we rightly recoil from the endless labelling of anyone who disagrees with the hard right as elites, right? But there is a kernel of truth in it, which is that there's a danger, and I think looking back on it now, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but the Democrat campaign in America was hyper elite. It was so elite. It was Beyonce and rich people,
George Clooney
and George Clooney. It had nothing. there was no point of friction and abrasion
Yeah.
and sort of Velcro with real American life.
Yeah.
It looked glossy and sheeny, but it also looked a million years out of date.
Yeah.
And I think that I'd love to think that in the next year, and there are people, by the way, who are, I mean, Angela Rayner is on massive manoeuvres, you know.
I hope so, because I think,
I think she's a very good thing.
Totally great, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about stories for 2025, watch Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting competing.
Well, I watched Wes Streeting on Laura Koonsberg.
Yeah.
And I thought he was terrific.
He was very good.
One, he was the only person saying anything about the Jess Phillips.
He broke the crust.
He really did, and he said, it's a scandalous smear.
Yeah.
But I thought, there's a guy who has got a real connection with people.
Yes.
Because he comes from an ordinary place.
He does.
He comes from he's gay. He's
proud of every bit of his identity.
Totally.
which is a really attractive characteristic in a politician.
And he speaks so well and normally, and it occurred to me, I don't know why it hasn't occurred to me before, but I thought, well, actually there's potentially the next Prime Minister, Wes Streeting. Wouldn't that be a great...
I think he'd be... I mean, to be honest with you, there'd always been part of me that had hoped that Starmer would be the John Smith, not without the death, I hasten to add. Right? I want Keir to live a long and happy life on the eight-a-side football field. Right? Let me stress that, listeners. But I thought maybe Starmer will serve a term, right?
Yeah,
and then he'll be sent off to the former Labour leaders' lounge, right?
Yeah.
And Wes would take over. Because I actually thought that he would be a better fresh start Labour Prime Minister than Starmer.
I think, honestly, because he's got that...
He just got it.
I don't want to spike it for him, but he's got something. He's got that riz, do they call it? What
it's
do
riz.
the kids call it?
He's at ease with himself. Every element of his identity he's at ease with.
Yeah.
But he's also communicates something which Labour doesn't across the board, which is impatience.
Yeah.
He wants to get out of the traps. He wants to get the thing done.
Yeah.
There's a slight sort of, he pulsates with, I want to get on with it, and that's great.
Yeah, but he's got the key characteristic for me, and maybe I'm overplaying it, but you can tell he's got a sense of humour.
Oh, totally.
Which is, I'm afraid, not obvious in Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer's sense of humour, I think, we should have a reader competition to where's it gone? Where's Wally? Because he's a politician in pieces, Starmer.
Yeah.
There are some, as we saw today, he can be formidable, right? Yeah. But at other times he can't be formidable. And he was doing the NHS thing, and I had my internal mental bingo card, and there it was. His mum had Still's disease. His sister works in the health service. And it's just, you've got to stop saying this catechism every time you mention health. Yeah. It's going to drive people insane.
We know.
We really do know, and we get it, and it's fine.
Yeah.
The first 1,500 times it was fine because it sort of established your locus in the health service debate. Yeah. But we don't need it anymore.
By the way, one anomaly to that, and to his eternal credit, not that it needs saying, but is the sad passing of his brother.
Oh, very, very sad.
But the fact that, according to Tom Baldwin anyway, Keir Starmer spent many, many trips going up to see him in hospital over the last few months without any knowledge of that happening. I mean, of course he would, but it's commendable that he did.
He is. Look, I mean, whatever happens with Keir Starmer, whatever happens to him, he's a decent man. Yeah. I'm 100% convinced of that. I don't think there's a dark side to him, or let's face it. We've been through a pretty grubby run of prime ministers who, in their different ways, have all had a kind of moral grubbiness or a kind of concealment of their true identity. But, I think Starmer is who he is, and he is a very decent, patriotic guy. And I'll always give him that. Yeah. And I think that speaks
I think that's true. Even notwithstanding the people who accuse him of being the most deceitful, genocidal...
Yeah, I don't know who you mean.
Yeah. Who could I mean?
Who do you mean?
Who's making a load of money from calling people genocidal maniacs?
It is interesting, though, talking of him, and we didn't really get the chance to talk in the first part when we were talking about him and Musk, about the health stuff. And I do think this is going to be a huge year for health here and internationally.
Yes.
So, I don't know what your take on it was, but I felt really that what he announced today was not a whole lot.
Well, he was just basically saying, I'm not going to make you go to see a consultant if you don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, the various sort of my niggling doubt. First of all, he said far too robustly, there ain't no more money coming.
Yeah.
When there clearly is going to have to be money coming.
Yeah.
There just is.
Yeah.
It's fine to just go on about reform as a prerequisite of money, but reform and money, and a lot of it. And then this talk about community diagnostic centres, and I sort of looked up what they are, and some of them are genuinely sort of centres which have scanning equipment, and others of them are in temporary things at football grounds and or at pharmacies. And what worries me a lot about this is they're obviously trying to take pressure off the specialists, and indeed off the GPs. And I just worry that what's going to happen is there's going to be a series of walls of deterrence, which is you don't need to do this, go to a CDC, a diagnostic centre, go to the pharmacy, and in the end you'll have most people going to the pharmacy, and those who can either pay for a private doctor or negotiate the system, going to a GP.
Well, this is what I agree with you. Now, there's an increasing use of people paying 60 quid for a GP
I'll be honest.
appointment because they can't be arsed going through the rigmarole of trying to get an NHS
also because
appointment.
By the time you get an appointment, whatever you've had, you've either died or it's gone. I mean,
right.
There are other things in it, like this incentive to GPs, 20 quid if they phone up a specialist before referral. Now, that seems to me to embed into the system a disincentive to refer.
Yeah.
I'm not like that. And the other thing, which is the biggest of the lot for me, which is the NHS app. No.
You don't think so?
Nope.
No.
I mean, I don't, unless they absolutely pour money into it and get really first-rate people from, a deep mine or somewhere like that.
But why can't they do that?
Well,
that's precisely what they should be doing.
Maybe they will,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I'm just too scarred by the useless apps in COVID time, right?
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, were done very, very fast and at scale. But I suppose the other thing that worries me about them a bit is, there's something very Thatchery in his language about health, which is he wants to devolve to the patient control over their care. And that's good up to a point. But actually, if you're sitting in the 14th floor of a council block and you're, 84, an NHS app which says, hi, I'm Siri, is not really what you want. You just want an appointment with your doctor or care at home to help you.
I think my layman's view on it, because you mentioned robotics being important, and I think if you cast forward, say, the next generation, 25 years' time, we're going to see a population that is diagnosed automatically because of devices that we are wearing on our bodies. That,
I think that's right.
Through artificial intelligence interpreting our biometrics, and we'll almost be given the prescription before we even ask for it. It'll you need statins now, son, because X, Y, and Z. So if you work back from there, I think stuff like a functioning app that will be able to do repeat prescriptions efficiently and stuff like that should be feasible, and there'll be a procession of steps towards a much greater technological solution. But we should get somebody on the show who knows what they're talking about.
No, we really should. We should get one of our friends to come.
Let's endeavour to do that.
I'll tell you one thing they could do, which is in the scale. It's 192 billion spent on England and Wales in England and Wales on the health service. It would cost between seven. I did this back of an envelope yesterday. If you offered every single adult a gym membership voucher, assuming it's 20 quid a month.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is the price of a pure gym membership.
Pure gym membership, right? And a voucher, not cash in hand, because then they go and spend it on sweeties and cider, and that's bad, as we know, right? So you have to, and you have to use, and this is easily done nowadays because gyms keep records. You have to use it to keep it.
Yes.
Right. It would only cost about 8 billion quid.
Right.
Now think of the preventive medicine value
Yeah.
of if people just went once a week.
Yeah.
To the
And
gym.
the industry you'd create in the gym world. You know.
I mean, the economies of scale are massive.
In fact,
you
you'd
know.
have to get in a load of personal trainers from France and Bulgaria and Poland. So
Yeah.
we'd have to have some freedom of movement.
It's almost as if we need to be a member of the single market, isn't it? But I thought, this is the year that there should be a change. And of course, the weird element in it is going to be if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is confirmed as health secretary in America, it's going to be very odd because on the one hand, he wants to bring back polio by abolishing vaccines, right?
Yeah.
But on the other
Did he
hand,
campaign on that? Bring back polio.
no, make America polio-ridden again. But no, I mean, his views on vaccines, he's very slippery, as you know,
Yes,
about this.
yeah.
But I mean, he doesn't think vaccines are good, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not sure he'll get very far on this. But what he will do, and this matters a lot, and it matters here because these conspiracy theories travel, is he'll encourage vaccine hesitancy. So I'd be very surprised if he ends up saying your kids can't have vaccines. No.
Yeah.
But what will happen is with the power of the American state behind him, he'll encourage voters of all sorts to go, maybe my kids don't need to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And
we've seen that in this country.
with
the Daily Mail picking up the MMR
already
jab, saying that's, and God knows how many people have died because of that, ignorance.
A great many already.
Yeah.
And then, but the other confusing bit, which I find really, really, really is going to cause me all sorts of headaches, is that he's right about some things.
Yes.
So he's right about ultra-processed food, and he's right that throwing Ozempic at the problem is not the answer.
Yeah.
It's eating well and exercising, and he's right that factory farming is horrible. And so there's a whole range of things, and he wants to take on Big Pharma, and bring down the prices of drugs.
Well, can we close this down now? Because we've tested our listeners' patience.
Yes, I know, we're going on.
But to your point, to take it out, I think one of our challenges, and I'm talking about the two of us in the future, is working out where they are right.
Yes.
And help and incorporating who we see as the opposition have got a point, but to put it within the values we hold dear.
Yes.
I mean, that's the challenge.
The world has gone mad. The world is on fire. Parties that are abhorrent are gaining power. But it's not enough just to call them not all Nazis, even if they are.
Yeah.
What you have to do is look at how has this arisen, and this is where it gets complicated, and it is an ongoing journalistic exercise. It is very selectively which are the bits of their offer that are actually sensible. Now, I'm not sure it's that many things, but they are there.
Yeah.
They are there. And I think, just to close off, I think one of the things that they're right about and the left is nowhere on is the sense that capitalism is just not serving huge numbers of people anymore. That the left is, they'll all be off to Keir Starmer says he prefers Davos to Westminster, right? He'll be off to Davos later this month, and we have to be on the side of the little guy again.
100%. 100%.
That's all.
If they think a trillionaire and Donald Trump are the answer to the little guy, they're
Think
barking
again.
up the wrong tree.
Think again.
Please, I hope you've enjoyed this longer
We enjoyed
format.
it.
It won't always be this long, but we'll endeavour to make it as interesting as possible. This was quite
We'll go full
wide-ranging.
Rogan and do a 4-hour.
Oh my God, can you imagine? That'd be great, wouldn't it? Right, tell us about that,
Jordan,
Jamie.
Jordan Peterson. Oh my God!
Fantastic. If you like the podcast, subscribe to The New European, please. You'll get a free bottle of El Rayo tequila to help sugar that pill. It costs from just £1 a week, or almost £1 a week, £1.15 I think a week for all of that, and a big bottle of tequila.
You're mad not to. A bottle of tequila and truth.
Truth
in your hands.
Truth. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2 Matts. And thank you. See you on Thursday.
See you on
Thanks as ever
Thursday.
to our production team.
It's great to be back.
Rethink Audio.
We've
led
missed
by
you.
Matt Hill. Thank you, Matt. And until Thursday, have
a great week. See you on Thursday.
Okay, great.
I do think